Hello, everybody, and welcome to EonD Talks, which is our series of interviews with our distinguished experts, top-level professionals in their fields, where we try to talk about some of their experiences as advisors, as external experts, and discuss the current global trends in expertise delivery and how organizations are adapting to them. And today, we're very privileged to have an excellent guest, and my guest is Mr. Todd Rosenblum. Todd, it's great to see you, and welcome to EonD Expert Talks. Todd, perhaps what I want to start with is a certain observation we've been making, especially after COVID in the last few months, maybe not after COVID, but when we've been moving to the next stage after 2 years of living with the pandemic. And that is that the whole world of the so-called gig economy, of the freelancer economy, has been not only accelerating, but also changing really to include experts and freelancers who've previously been more static in their positions, working in government, working in corporations, and are now looking at a different type of work-life balance, at a different type of professional opportunities. We've seen a very, very dramatic increase in that, and I've been wondering, in the field of defense and security, which is your prime one, is this also something you're observing and seeing among your other colleagues?
Well, Martin, first let me say it's a real pleasure to be chatting with you today and chatting again, because we've had a chance to get to know each other over the years, and it's always enjoyable, and I've always enjoyed working with you professionally as well. To your question, what's most interesting for me is I suspect the defense and security sector is probably one of the last sectors where people will, you would think of as joining the gig economy. And I say that for a couple reasons. Many of us have dealt with sensitive government programs. And so the idea of working remote pre-pandemic is something that was not really entered the lexicon. The pandemic mandated all of us work remotely. And so many of us saw for the first time in this field and in this sector, we can be remote, we can be flexible, we can be working in different locations, something that was just not part of the mindset of people in this space before. So absolutely, there's been an impact, and a positive impact, I believe, in terms of those in this field willing to think about the new economy in an accelerated way, along with so many others in the economy, but for a community of people that traditionally would probably be more reluctant to think of that they could make a contribution in other places, not just sitting at their traditional office desk.
No, that's if you think about it, and as you mentioned, these institutions have been adapting a little slower, possibly. But what we've been witnessing in the private sector, is a trend where it's estimated that some companies will be moving up to 50% of their workforce to an external workforce, right? So really using external talent, not just for those smaller freelance gigs, but for regular operations, for regular functioning. And this is also something that shows this move to this project-based economy. Now, will government institutions be also catching up to that level of external engagements, and particularly in the fields that we're talking about, especially if the best talent, the best expertise will want to work in that way and want to be engaged in those type of contracts? How do you see those processes happening?
Yeah, no, first, I agree with you very much that is the trend and where it's going. And I see it as highly advantageous, both for individuals like myself and for the government clients who are able to bring in a diverse set of expertise that traditionally they've not. Traditionally, they've looked who is in their immediate geographic location, who are the nationals, of their home country that have been in this field. Well, now the whole aperture is far wider because, as I've mentioned before, people in this sector are now much more willing to think about entering sort of the gig workforce, entering project-based assignments. And the receptivity, I think, is a natural offshoot of that, because I just think the additional and varying perspectives you get from pulling experts, whatever the field is, from around the world to come together for projects is a real advantage for governments, for clients in general, but especially for governments that tend to work in a quite insular fashion traditionally.
You've touched on a very interesting point, mentioning pooling of experts. Right? I remember, I think 2 years ago, we've been talking about this idea where we can engage one or two additional people to support a core team to increase this expertise around a certain project. And actually, if you think about this change we've been talking about now, and how many new experts would join this workforce with very, very specific expertise and with solid careers and more open to engage, it allows this formation of those project teams. Would you say this is one of those next trends also for the external workforce? So it's not only just that individuals will be engaging with projects, which could be with government agencies or government organizations, but also those small teams or mini teams of experts providing the combinations of expertise needed in a certain or particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that as a trend and where it's going. And I see it as a win-win from a couple different perspectives. One, for the individuals like myself that have had a chance to do this now for the past several years, I have learned a tremendous amount. I've learned insights from my counterparts in other countries as we work as a multinational team, giving best advice to another government. So when we think about an issue, I have my own perspective, my own background and experiences, but I do that from my own home country. When we bring in other experts from other countries, they're organized slightly differently. They have different terminology. They have different processes. And it makes, I believe, me smarter to know more about how they do it. So I'm more effective at pulling together best recommendations. And then on top of that, I think it's a win for when we all return to our home country, if we continue to do work advising or working in our own governments. Well, we're now smarter because we have that insight that we've learned from working with others, that there's other ways to do things, and we bring that knowledge back to our own countries as well. So I see the win as three ways. Me as an individual, the client at the moment in terms of getting that advice, and then third, the host country, the home country of the individual, because you get people after these experiences more flexible in their own thinking about problem sets, and therefore likely to come up with more thought out options on courses ahead.
Can you tell me a little bit on your impressions on the role of technology here, and sort of where we are and where we're going within this whole change of the growing global freelancer, and I mean high skilled freelancer, right? So
right.
A computer, a graphic, right, or an IT programmer, but really of the high skilled expert.
Yeah, so the way I'd first answer the question is obviously changes in technology have allowed us to participate globally from remote locations in ways we've not before, and that's a positive thing. I am still a bit old school, though, where I do believe it's critical that there be time on the ground, both with a client and both with a team of experts, because we can accomplish a lot working remotely, but there still are periods where I find it very beneficial just to have the more casual time you get working with someone physically in the same location for at least parts of a project, not necessarily a whole project. So the technology piece, it's when we match the advances in terms of ease of communicating with each other, and partnering and collaborating on projects with the ability to also get time on the ground. To me, that's the optimal mix you want to see. I've worked some projects remote completely, and it's worked out well because I've already known an environment. I've already known the colleagues I've worked with. I suspect it would be more challenging if I was brand new to the people I'm working with or the company or the client, just because I think I would feel a bit of a gap, because so much of what we're doing in this field in general requires us to really sort of understand the perspective of the client. What are their issues? What are their challenges? What are their barriers to accomplishing what they want to accomplish? And you could read all the materials you want beforehand. Sometimes it just takes being in the halls with them and having casual conversations to really understand. So it's matching that technology piece, but also investing some presence on the ground in each project, I think is very helpful.
Right. Not yet moving to the full metaverse with avatars of our experts. But you've touched on an interesting point, which I was also wondering about. Especially in the defense and security area, obviously the element of security itself of communication is of importance in many projects. So if you're engaging as an external expert and particularly not say on the ground and in a premise, but remotely, how is this ensured? I mean, what do you see some challenges and then solutions to this type of areas?
So I think there's technical solutions, and there's also trust issues that always have to be established. And third, there's integrity issues when you're in this field. And I'll begin with the last, on the integrity piece of it. We all come from our home countries. Most of us would come to this with prior experience working in our own governments. And, we have the perspectives of who we are and where we've been and what we've done. And it is very important to take the knowledge we have, but also be careful in terms of our own integrity of not sharing sensitive information the way our own country might do something that you would not, it would not be appropriate to share per se, some of the specific things. Now, everything that's publicly available to me is a good way to have that conversation, but that personal integrity piece is vital, which flows into the trust piece, because we are all coming in a field that's got sensitivities associated with it. We need to be able to trust each other, that when we do have insights and we share them with each other, we're staying within our circle of trust about this. We, of course, assume none of us are talking about things that would be government sensitive to our home country, but we're still working in fields and the way processes work. So we have to have that integrity, we have to have that trust, and then on top of that, you also have the technology piece to ensure information stays secure all throughout the project. And by the information, not that there's a transferring of anything classified, but that the collective recommendations that we're making, in fact, they become sensitive for the client themselves. And so there's a whole range of tools that are used, whether it's asking us to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is quite understandable from a host country standpoint, but also when we're given access to information, sometimes they say, you can see this, you could read it, a physical document when you're on the ground, but that's it. We won't give you something electronically. Or when you're communicating, you have to communicate using our portals so we know the integrity of access in and access out of information from that portal. So, for example, when I'm working with a company I've been working with for several years, they'll provide me one of their company laptops. And that's the way that they ensure security and integrity of their data. And I could only access that data when I'm using their laptop. And when I'm not on project, I don't have access to it. And all that is appropriate. And I think that also helps on the security piece as well. So you build in those three layers, as I've said, integrity, trust, and then technology of protecting information. And all those pieces go together, I think, in a understandable and a logical way.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, and especially in this field, right? Because that requires this element of trust and sometimes confidentiality at the highest part, which is also interesting for me from another perspective, and I don't know if you can comment a little bit of that, but if those such tools as blockchain that we mentioned here or others can be somehow used to generate this element of trust. We've raised this with another conversation with one of our experts, and he was mentioning that this could be something perhaps not in all fields, but in many used to verify and to make sure that something is solidified, let's say, from a trust point perspective by multiple guarantees.
Right. And I agree with that. I think for me, the essence of blockchain is it's providing transparency, accountability, and awareness of who is accessing information, or who is editing, entering, or leaving information changes in a product, in a process. It allows you, it not only makes one feel comfortable that I'm in a secure environment, but also for those who are receiving it, I think they probably have increased trust too when you have tools like blockchain that really create emphasis that we're in a trusting environment now and we're working together, and your inputs are going to be valid, and we're going to be able to see whose inputs were done when, where, and why, all throughout. So it's another portal of both security and transparency, which often seem like contradictory terms, but I think in this case, and blockchain's a classic example of that, where it does give more transparency and more security at the same time.
Right. Well, we'll definitely see developments in this area
Yes.
for sure, and we're also seeing it in the whole community of our experts who are engaged with EonD. And speaking of the community of our experts here, one thing we'd like to share with our viewers and with our listeners are the expert stories. So, Todd's story. What is Todd's story? How has Todd come from being a very senior government official to a very senior and experienced global advisor? And if you can tell us some of the ups and downs and something that also fascinated you most in that journey.
Yeah, no, so thank you for asking. First, I'll preface my story, I suspect, is not all that interesting, so it'll be fairly brief, my answer. But I left government after nearly 30 years on the inside and working one way, thinking about issues from a government standpoint. And when I left, it was in many ways a new world for me. And I went and worked for a large multinational technology company for a period, and I saw the world through those eyes, which was quite new. It was interesting for me to do that, but it was also different from the way my own mind worked and my own sort of thought processes about what are goals, objectives, and preferred outcomes. So I'm a sort of a substantive person. I think a lot about national security issues, whether I'm writing them or assessing them or making recommendations about them or advancing my own views. What I have found in this field of being expert advisors, it actually keeps me close to the field at which I have come from, but does it in a way now that it is about knowledge exchange, not so much knowledge transfer, but knowledge exchange, and staying and building on the insights that I've been able to do for all these years while I was on the inside. So what I really love, and I think I talked about this before, is working with teams of individuals from different countries who have similar experiences to mine, but have thought about them differently, come from a different part of the world, have different processes, and are working for a client that may be thinking it from a third angle as well. So I've been able to sort of leverage what I really care about, what I'm experienced in doing it, and doing it in a way now with more independence in my own sort of analysis and thinking about issues, and my own abilities to partner with people and coming up with fused products that is really enjoyable from my standpoint. So it's a fun experience. It's one that it is different from, so in the US where I'm from, there's a lot of former government people. They work for companies that are supporting the US government here in the Washington, D.C. area. And that's tremendous work and it's very interesting, but you're sort of advising then the same client who you worked for on the inside before. This is giving me the ability to sort of take that, but continue to sort of turn the Rubik's Cube a little bit in my own thinking about issues, because the advising that I'm doing now is coming at it from different angles, from a different culture, from a different part of the world, from a different group of partners in the process. So it's actually advancing to me from where I was before to where I am now. So it's fun. And I also enjoy spending time on the ground. I enjoy the travel. It could be long hours. It could be far from home. Everything one knows about. But at the end of the day, this ability to work on projects, and then also come back home afterwards, and then work on the projects partially on the ground, partially remotely. It's flexible. I'm meeting new people from around the world. It's fun and it's enjoyable for me.
Thanking you for this. I want to really congratulate you, Todd, on all the work you've been doing in your career in the public, in the private sector. And thank you again for the work you've been doing with us. It's been a real pleasure. I look forward to our continued collaboration and to more conversations. It's always good, and to see you in one or another part of the world as we've been able to.
Yes.
Before. And I really want to thank you in participating as our distinguished guest here at EonD Expert Talks. And I wish you a great day in DC.
Well, thank you. I'd say it's cold here in DC, but I also know in Warsaw it's colder, so I can't complain.